The Fight Against Fraud, how you can help prevent the misuse of education funds. Featuring Damian White, Special Agent, and Doris Plaza, Special Agent, Department of Education, Office of Inspector General.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Special Agent Damian White. I am accompanied by Special Agent Doris Plaza. We are special agents with the United States Department of Education, Office of Inspector General, and today we are presenting the fight against fraud, how you can help prevent misuse of education funds. Okay, guys, so to give you a little background on the presentation, so we'll give you a slight background of the Office of Inspector General. We're going to explain to you why your Title IV institutions are targets. We're going to discuss external fraud, internal fraud. We're going to dabble into emerging frauds and threats. These are things that the OIG has been investigating recently. These are new fraud trends that we've been seeing, and pathways to success, and more importantly, how to report fraud to the OIG. Okay, so a little background of the OIG. Okay, so in 1978, President Carter passes the Inspector General Act of 1978. So what did that do? That gave the Inspector Generals the authority and power to conduct investigations. It also stipulated that any department with a budget of $1 million or more must have an IG attached to it. So there was a lot of money flowing out throughout the United States, and there had to be some type of agency to oversee all those funds going out. Okay, so this is the organizational chart of the U.S. Department of Education. So the most important part to notice about this chart is that in regards to the Office of Inspector General, we operate independent of the department. What does that mean? So with us being independent, it means that we conduct criminal investigations. So there is a possibility in our investigations that we may have to investigate department employees. Hence is why we're independent. But luckily for us, a lot of our bad actors are external to the department, which means they operate outside the department. So a lot of the bad guys are outside of the department. Now let's break down the three components of the OIG. So first we have audit services, then we have information technology audits and computer crime investigations, TACI, and then third, investigation services. So let's break down what audit services does. So audit services, well, it's kind of inherent in their name, audit service. They conduct audits, but they also strengthen program language too, of our program languages, because I can tell you program language from the department can be sometimes confusing. So that's their job, to strengthen program language, and they can sometimes also conduct routine audits too as well. Information technology audits, computer crime investigations, TACI. That's a mouthful. However, they have changed their name to TAS, which is Technology Analytics Services. They serve as our technology enforcement division. So they investigate economic and cyber crimes. They also serve as a data dump for us investigators. So if you can imagine, we have tons and tons of information that we need to evaluate and have analyzed. So these fraud rings, folks, sometimes we have to analyze and go back 7 to 10 years of banking records. So you can imagine that's a lot of numbers and a lot of information. Sometimes it's a terabyte of information. And so for us investigators, for Doris and I to go through all that information, it could possibly take anywhere upwards from, myself or her to sit down and dive through all the information, a terabyte of information. It'll probably take us about a year or so. So TACI, now known as TAS, they can dive in, they can consolidate all that information in probably a month or more. They have the ability in the database to do so. And of course, there's investigative services that you think of, most people think of when they think of OIG. We're the investigators. We're the ones that go out. We're the ones on the ground. We're the ones serving subpoenas, conducting arrests, issuing subpoenas, all that good stuff. So we're the ones in the suits that actually make the cases. Okay, so guys, here is a map of all the Office of Inspector General offices. It's important to note that there is not an office located in every single state. We are a very small agency with a very big budget. So the important thing to note is if you make a referral over to the Office of Inspector General, there might not be an agent located in your state. However, we are able to travel up, conduct the interviews, issue subpoenas, and meet with you good folks. A lot of the groundwork can be done at our desk. However, we're able to fly out and meet, conduct, make the arrests, issue subpoenas, and all that good stuff. Now, investigation services. What do we do, and who are we? Well, number one, we're federal law enforcement officers who receive extensive training in criminal investigation and civil law. We also make the cases. We also seek civil restitution as well. Another function of the OIG is to coordinate with federal and state and local entities too. We also work hand in hand. A lot of times with fraud, if they're committing fraud against the U.S. Department of Education, most likely they're also defrauding other programs too as well. We operate the OIG hotline too as well. And like I said in my previous slide, we also conduct outreach. It's important that we go out and meet with stakeholders, and that way everybody knows who we are and what we do. Okay, so there's two differences between OIG investigative services and federal student aid program compliance. So with OIG investigation services, number one, we investigate any fraud impacting our department program. We work with state and federal prosecutors, of course, to make that case. We have statutory law enforcement authority to carry firearms, execute search warrants, and make arrests. And like I said before, we operate independently. Now, FSA, program compliance, when they come out, they conduct compliance reviews. They take administrative actions. They have program operating responsibilities, and they are required to send all allegations of fraud to the OIG. Now, with OIG and FSA coordination, it's important to note that federal student aid, FSA, they are required to send all matters over to the OIG. Now, the OIG is not required to send any and all matters over to FSA. What happens is, if you good folks refer a matter over to us, just note that not every single referral matter that you guys send over to us will become a full-blown investigation. Sometimes we operate in jurisdictional boundaries and threshold amounts. So unfortunately, sometimes not all cases that are referred over to us become full-blown investigations. However, as an administrative remedy, what the OIG can utilize is we can refer the names of victims and fraudsters over the federal student aid, have their names flagged and the ISIS flagged, which will prohibit them from taking out any more aid. So it's just another administrative remedy that the OIG utilizes in order to fight fraud. Okay. Now, why are your institutions targets? Now, let's break down what is fraud. And usually in my live conferences, I always ask what is fraud, but for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. So what is fraud? Fraud is just a deliberate distortion of the truth. It's a deliberate lie in order to gain something of value. And what is that value? Money. It's basically just lying and cheating. Okay, so why are your institutions targets for fraud? Simply put, you all have the money. You all have the money. The fraudsters know it. There's a lot of money going through, and your institutions have a need to disperse those funds quickly. Your institutions might not even be set up to detect the fraud. Oftentimes at your institutions, there might be limited people working in the federal student aid department. So, for example, during fall and spring, there might be 300 applications of students coming through your college. And there might be only 13 individuals working there. So, simply put, you might not be equipped to detect all that fraud. Now, why do you guys play an important role to the OIG? Well, simply put, you guys are the eyes and ears of fraud. A lot of times, the OIG has made cases just based off your referrals alone. We can tell you a lot of times, you all see what's happening. When you guys refer the cases over to us, you guys tell us what's going on. You say, hey, listen, this is what's going on at our schools. We have fraudsters saying they're doing A, B, C, D, E, and they're really doing E, F, G, and J. So we've built a lot of cases just based off your referrals alone. That's why you all are important to the OIG. Let's talk about fraud risk indicators. Okay, so what are certain things that the Office of Inspector General looks for in order to look for fraud risk indicators? You may have one person in control. No separation of duties. Say, for example, the same person that authorizes expenditures, the same person that approves those expenditures. Lack of internal controls. The institution has no prior audits. Prior audits not reconciled. High turnover. Usually large amounts of cash payments. Going back to when we, send matters over to a TACI, When they consolidate all those records, we tell them, hey, look for large cash payments, large expenditures, inadequate or missing documentation, altered records, unauthorized transactions, and related party transactions. And moving over to the right, you can see the fraud triangle. So what makes up the fraud triangle? You got opportunity, motivation, and rationalization. So right there, that makes the fraud triangle right there. If there's an opportunity to conduct it, and you're motivated enough to do it, and you can rationalize, what's rationalization? It's pretty much just making excuses for why you're committing the fraud. Weak controls, like there's nobody overseeing, any of the spending. Little no oversight. Lacks rules. Let's say, sometimes persons have high debt. That's a reason for them committing fraud. Addictions, gambling, drug addictions. Status, hey, you commit fraud because, hey, you want to maintain that status. You have a status that you portray that you're wealthy and you have a lot of nice things, a house, a nice car, and you want to maintain that status somehow. Sheer greed. I mean, time and time again, it's just a lot of fraud. It's just the result of just people being sheer greed. The money's there and they want to take it. And rationalization, once again, that's just making excuses. Hey, everyone does it. The government spends a lot of money. I see the government spends a lot of money on the Department of Defense. They got all those jets sitting there. They're not going to miss, $20,000 of, education funds or $50,000. Shoot, everybody's doing it. I'm only borrowing the money and I'm going to pay it back. That's always a common excuse we see at the end of these investigations. Once we, corner the subject, I promise I was going to pay it back. I promise I'm going to pay it back. I was underpaid and I deserve it. These are rationalization techniques that people use, to convince themselves that it's okay to commit this fraud. Now, let's talk about types of fraudulent activity. So we have fraud committed by students and fraud committed by school officials. So if you look at the left, fraud committed by students. Number one, it's basically just FAFSA fraud. It's just flat out just lying on your FAFSA. Fake social security numbers, fake alien registration numbers, dependency status, increasing the amount of dependents you have, income and assets, having that income and assets, not, displaying your income and assets on the FAFSA form, bolstering the number of family members in college, flat out just committing identity theft, falsifying documents. These days, guys, online, you can buy a fake notary stamp on Amazon. Just flat out distance education schemes. Move to the right, fraud committed by school officials. A lot of times we've seen in investigating schools, a lot of CEOs and owners of these schools, they've created ghosting students. Boasted the amount of students going there. There's only 25 students, but they indicate they have 45 students there in order to get more money. Plain out theft and embezzlement of the funds, obstructing program and federal audits, manipulation of the 90-10 rule. You guys know what the 90-10 rule is, right? That's basically no more than 90% of your funds can come from federal sources. Compromising of system privileges, compromise of protected information, going in after hours, cooking the books, and unauthorized access of prohibited IT systems or protected data. Okay, statutory and regulatory access to records. So under 34 CFR 668.24, if your institution participates in our programs, you are required to turn over any and all records if you all participate in that programs. Now, why is that the case? Because analyzing those records helps us prove our case. We need to be able to prove to the prosecutor that a lot of the fraudsters are taking the same courses, either registering the same programs, have failing grades, what times they, apply for grades, how much in federal student aid they receive. So a lot of times we'll just send you guys over a nice friendly letter that stipulates that the OIG is FERPA exempt. And then that way you guys can comply with that request. Criminal and civil remedies used by the OIG. So one of the most important statutes that we utilize the OIG is 20 USC 1097. That's pretty much student aid fraud. It stipulates that any person who knowingly and willfully embezzles, misapplies, steals, obtains by fraud, false statement or forgery, or fails to refund any funds, assets, or property provided or insured under Title IV of the Higher Education Act, or anyone who attempts to perform the above actions, those persons convicted of a felony shall be fined no more than $20,000 or imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both. That's a pretty powerful statute. Also, other statutes that the OIG employs too as well. mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Mail fraud, let's go ahead and break that down. If a fraudster, applies online and, for a on the free application for federal student aid, the U.S. Department of Education sends out mail correspondence as a result of that fraud. That's a kind of mail fraud right there. Wire fraud is any wire sent, any type of correspondence, an email sent from the department as a result of that fraud. That's kind of wire fraud. Also, too, for example, the fraudster zeroes out all the expected family contributions, for all their fraudulent students that they've ran through our systems in your school, and then the Department of Treasury wires those funds from the Department of Treasury to your school. That's another kind of wire fraud right there. Once your school receives those funds and you guys wire those funds to all the fraudulent student accounts, that's another kind of wire fraud right there. That's a very important statute right there. Conspiracy. Let's break down what conspiracy is. Conspiracy means two or more people who conspire to commit offense against the United States government, and then they act in further of that offense. Why two or more people? Because you can't conspire amongst yourself. And it's most important to note about conspiracy too, which is another common statute that we employ, is that not all actors need to know of each other. A conspiracy can be of one person who's stealing the information. Another person is doing the coursework for the students. They not need to know that each other exists to be involved in the conspiracy. Let's break down Civil Claims Act. So 31 U.S.C. 3729. Any person who knowingly presents or causes to be presented to the United States government a false, fraudulent claim for payment or approval, no proof of a specific intent to defraud is required. Guys, civil false claims is a very powerful, yet it's very difficult to prove. However, one of the most important parts is with civil false claims, this is known as parallel proceedings. We can employ criminal proceedings as well as, civil claims too as well. If we are able to prove that the person made a viable civil false claim, that person is liable for civil penalties of $10,000 to $20,000 per claim, plus 3 times the amount of actual damages. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. External fraud trends. Let's go ahead and talk about a distance education fraud ring. So this is pretty interesting. The U.S. Department of Education Office of Inspector General received a referral from Pikes Peak Community College in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So approximately 183 applications containing the names of inmates were submitted for federal student aid at several community colleges in Colorado and Arizona. Scheme involved 4 individuals conspiring to defraud the U.S. Department of Education by submitting false claims of federal student aid using stolen identities of persons who are inmates. So it's important to note, guys, despite the fact that the inmates' names were used throughout the fraud, the inmates, despite them being incarcerated for various crimes, including robbery, rape, or extortion, the inmates actually became victims of this crime. They were unwilling participants in this fraud. So the 4 conspirators were able to carry out the scheme by visiting various Department of Correction websites to obtain the inmates' the names and their dates of birth, as well as other identifying information. The stolen inmates' identities were stolen from Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, and Ohio. So as a result, these individuals were indicted by a federal grand jury, and 3 of the 4 defendants pled guilty. The defendants were ordered to repay back $563,890,000 in restitution. This case was solved through the collaborative efforts of the OIG and financial aid school officials. So once again, the school officials, with that collaboration, you guys were able to identify that fraud, report it to the OIG, and we were able to make the case. That's why you guys are so important in referring fraud over to the Office of Inspector General. Debt relief fraud. Okay. These are, these are new emerging threats that we're seeing now with the Office of Inspector General. So these companies are heavily unregulated. A lot of times they operate in Southern California. Why? Because that's where they're heavily unregulated. California does not regulate these institutions. A company called Student Loan Relief Department lured borrowers through advertisements on Facebook to reduce their debt. The Student Loan Relief Department obtained and used the PII from students. PII meaning personally identifying information. To gain access to the federal student aid student loan portal. SLRD allegedly advised borrowers that they qualified for a debt relief program and entice them to take out high interest loans to pay the company a fee up to $1,300 for the services. The services SLRD offered, including loan deferment and income-driven repayment programs, are already available to the students through ED free of charge. When I mean ED, U.S. Department of Education. So a lot of these programs are already offered to you students free of charge. You don't have to go to these third-party debt relief companies in order to get assistance. You're either getting forbearance on your loans or temporary payments of relief from the department. So in March of 2020, 5 of those officials, including the chief executive officer, were arrested in a 20-count indictment for allegedly preying on student loan borrowers.
Network intrusion. I know that Damien had spoken briefly about Itaki earlier in the slides, and this is one instance in which Itaki was able to assist the OIG with respect to a criminal investigation. A University of Nebraska student gained unauthorized access to the university's computer system and stole the academic profiles of approximately 650,000 students. The student was allegedly attempting to change his recorded grades. TCD, Technology Crimes Division, along with the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the university police investigated and seized the student's personal computer via a search warrant. The examination of that computer revealed that the student had performed reconnaissance from outside and inside the university's networks. By comparing this data with logs from the university, investigators were able to compile a comprehensive timeline of the student's actions and prove that the student had committed a crime. The student, who was sentenced to the violation of 18 U.S.C. 1030, fraud-related activity in connection with computers, was sentenced to 1 year confinement and fined $107,000.
Let's talk about internal fraud. Civil investigations. So the OIG conducts civil investigations. KETAM. Let's break down what KETAM means. So does anybody here know what KETAM is? Probably not. So I'll go ahead and explain to you guys. KETAM is Latin. It's a Latin phrase meaning he who brings suit on behalf of the king. So oftentimes we'll receive these matters from someone known as or later, and they're in essence bringing a suit on behalf of the federal government when they detect fraud. So a KETAM was filed in the District of South Carolina alleging that North Greenville University, Oral Roberts University, and San Diego Christian College each violated the department's ban on incentive compensation. So that's a big no-no. You can't incentivize your staff to enroll students, using funds obtained from the federal government. So the OIG and the U.S. Department of Justice, this both collaborative effort, determined that the schools use federal funds to pay vendor commissions, bonuses, and incentive payments for recruiting students for enrollment. Now, as a result of the investigation, the Department of Justice reached civil settlements with both schools. North Greenville University agreed to pay back $2.5 million to FSA, and Oral Roberts University agreed to pay back $303,000 to the federal student aid. I'm sorry, they agreed to pay well over $303,000 back to federal student aid. Now, it's important to know that with KETAMs, if the relator prevails, they can actually recoup a third of the settlement. So you can see KETAMs are pretty big business. All right, let's talk about Galliano Career Academy. So Galliano was the founder of Galliano Career Academy, and Galliano Career Academy was operating as a diploma mill. So what's a diploma mill? A diploma mill is an institution that receives Title IV funds but offers less than credible degree programs. So as a result, federal student aid conducted a program review at the school, and when it saw suspicious activity, it referred the matter to the Office of Inspector General, which launched a criminal investigation. Now, federal student aid was also going to institute an audit too as well. So prior to the audit, the founder, Galliano, actually installed cameras and microphones prior to the FSA program review in order to record the reviewers and their conversations. The OIG investigation revealed that Galliano Career Academy used the diploma mill to falsely certify ineligible students as high school graduates to circumvent Title IV requirements. As a result, the founder, Galliano, pleaded guilty to theft of government property, obstruction of a federal audit, and aggravated identity theft. Galliano was subsequently sentenced in order to pay back over $2 million in restitution.
Let's talk about a case involving the director of financial aid. This case was actually assigned to me. And it was a very interesting case. It had a lot of moving parts to it. The former director of financial aid at Teachers College, which is a part of Columbia University in New York, unilaterally inflated the students' cost of attendance, increasing the amount of financial aid they were eligible to receive. Over $1.4 million in unauthorized stipends were approved for students. The director of financial aid alleged to have received $350,000 in kickbacks from the students. Something to note is that the students were actually her friends, her associates. They took vacations together, they had dinners together, they socialized a lot. The former director of financial aid and 4 graduate students were arrested and charged with bribery, federal student aid fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bribery. All defendants pled guilty, and the director of financial aid was sentenced to 40 months in jail and over $2 million in restitution. Many who knew the director of financial aid also described her as professional. They were surprised that she would even do this. They had no idea that she would be capable. So it just goes to show that even the person that chose to be this upstanding individual is capable of committing fraud. The students also received a range of sentences from supervised release to 1 year and a day incarceration. One of the students was actually a nurse, and she was taking nursing classes as well as classes over at Teachers College when she had no intention of ever graduating from Teachers College.
Emerging frauds and threats. So COVID relief funds, just know, guys, that ever since the department's been issuing out a lot of money in COVID relief funds, fraud has gone up. Currently right now is about $280 billion from the Department of Education that went out to assist states, school districts, and institutions of higher education in meeting the needs of those impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. As a result, even the Office of Inspector General, we've actually had to create a new specialized unit called the Special Investigations Unit, which their sole purpose is to investigate fraud involving COVID relief and higher education emergency relief funds. So the most important part about COVID relief funds, if you detect that there's fraud occurring regarding those funds and those programs, just report it to the OIG. Unlike other Title IV programs, the requirements to qualify for HERF and COVID relief funds is you just have to be enrolled in an accredited institution. There's no set minimum amount of hours needing to be taken at the institution. You just have to be enrolled in an accredited institution in order to receive those funds. So if you see fraud, report it. Now, the purpose of higher education relief funds, number one, is the purpose of the funds is to assist students in institutions of higher education and those affected by the coronavirus pandemic. Distance education fraud rings are due mainly to increased online education, so you'll start seeing a bolstering of students enrolling through institutions whose sole purpose is just to receive the funds. Incentive compensation violations will more than likely happen due to more aggressive marketing to enroll students. We'll start seeing a lot more procurement fraud. Theft and embezzlement of those funds will increase. Purchasing of equipment for distance education learning without proper internal controls. There's also a possibility we can start seeing more public corruption, so public officials taking advantage of COVID-19 crisis to engage in fraudulent or otherwise illegal schemes. Fraud is afoot. Third-party debt relief companies, once again, these companies we're seeing again emerge from out of Southern California. They're highly unregulated. They like to, prey on a lot of student borrowers that have a lot of student debt. Interesting thing about these companies is that they make you pay upfront fees, which is illegal. If any company out there, makes you pay an upfront fee in order to, assist you in either, minimizing your payment or attempting to, eliminate your student debt, that's a red flag right there. They often charge monthly fees. They ask for your FSA ID and username and password, and surprisingly enough, people give them their FSA user ID and password. They actually offer, they actually operate on limited power of attorney. A lot of the victims actually give these companies limited power of attorney. They can, negotiate with the lenders on their behalf, the student loan lenders on their behalf. So they give these, like these third party companies, they give them a lot of power. They actually sign and submit a written agreement, giving you permission to make loan decisions on your behalf. They claim to be the offers limited, so you have to act now. The ads, emails, communications, even the websites contain grammatical errors. A lot of times when the fraud comes about is when these companies say, hey, listen, they'll prey on student borrowers. They'll say, hey, we're with the Department of Education, or we're offering on behalf of the Department of Education. When borrowers give them access to their FSAID username and password, they're given this third party company the ability to access U.S. Department of Education databases. There's that warning label that pops up when people log into a U.S. Department of Education database. It stipulates, hey, listen, you are certifying that you are the person who you say you are. So a lot of times, Attacky or technology analytic services, they've built great cases on access. These companies fraudulently accessing U.S. Department of Education databases, perpetrating to be the person who they say they are when in fact they're not. So these are just one of the many emerging, scams and trends that we've been seeing here at the OIG. Pathways to success. Best practices at your school. Hey, conduct a fraud risk assessment. Create a plan to mitigate risk and evaluate potential fraud. Coordinate with your IT departments to set up, algorithms to detect fraud. If you have a dedicated IT department, people that can set up those algorithms that can, detect certain things like, common IP addresses or common physical addresses. They might able to detect that, hey, all the refunds are going to common bank accounts. Out of 100 students, that we've seen come to the school, 47 of those refunds have all gone to a Wells Fargo account. A lot of these students are sharing common passwords and challenge questions. A lot of students are coming to your community college from, anomalous geographic locations. You might have a small community college district in Texas. Why have you seen an influx of students from Maine and Florida? They've passed over several community colleges, to attend your community college. Why is that? Participate in information sharing with other schools. Coordinate with other school districts. Talk to other school officials. Find out what they're doing to combat fraud. Require two-factor authentication to improve security of student accounts. There's nothing wrong with making students come in and verify who they are. If they're a legitimate student, they'll want to come and improve themselves to be who they are. I know certain school districts now that require students to participate with an advisor. It's required that you meet with an advisor before you enroll in colleges. And more importantly, formalize a process for reporting potential fraud to the OIG. If there's any type of fraud that you see, explain that to your people. If you see any type of fraud, hey, report it to us so we can report it to the OIG. Your role in preventing and detecting fraud, just review documents. A lot of you are already doing this. Like, review those documents. Look for false documents. Ensure your staff receive the necessary Title IV training. Like right now, a lot of you are participating in this training. Right now, you're doing your part. Stay current and alerts in communication from federal student aid. Participate in U.S. Department of Education's Facebook and Twitter page. They constantly have updates on how to combat fraud. More importantly, cooperate with the OIG. Why? Because you're required to do so. And don't tip off the subjects that there's an impending investigation going on. And more importantly, contact the OIG if you suspect fraud. Why report fraud to the OIG? Well, because you're statutorily required to do so. You have an ethical responsibility to cooperate with the OIG. More importantly, as institutions who have funds, you have Department of Funds going through your school, you are the stewards of those funds. It also deters others from committing fraud too. Protects the integrity of the Title IV programs, and more importantly, you avoid becoming part of the fraud scheme. If it goes on unreported, it may come to a point where the OIG gets it, and we may say, "Hey, wait a minute! It's a possibility that maybe somebody at your institution might be involved." So, in order to be in order to eliminate yourself from being a part of the investigation, report that fraud early on. And also, too, it avoids administrative, civil, and criminal penalties too as well. I don't think anybody's institution wants to be banned or barred from participating in Title IV programs. So there'd be a lot of students that wouldn't want to come to your institution if they're unable to participate in the federal student aid programs. Now, how to report fraud. go to the OIG hotline, oighotline.ed.gov. Or you can contact the regional office, which is pretty much close to your location, or go to www.echodelta.gov, ed.gov, and report the fraud there. Now, this is a snapshot of what it looks like when you report the fraud to the hotline. Simply right there is a red button that says report the fraud here. You can reach out to one of the local OIG offices because we have a systematic system of protocols, which is best to report the fraud. However, once again, go to oighotline.ed.gov to report the fraud, and it'll take you to this page here, and that's how you report the fraud. Questions? Like I said, I'm Special Agent Damian White. I am the resident agent in charge in Phoenix, Arizona, and also Special Agent Doris Plaza. She's Special Agent at Pembroke Pines, Florida. You can reach out to us or reach out to the department directly, or just report the fraud to the OIG website. Thank you all.
Thank you.